Hey, everybody. In this day and age of social media, things get passed around a lot. Misinformation, good information, we're overwhelmed with information. So, what do you do about it? How do you tell the differences? This is something that is a big part of science. So, as a science teacher, this is what we're going to talk about here. So, we've all learned the scientific method. That's every single science class. What I want you to remember, not memorize the steps here, is that the scientific method is evidence based. This is what science is all about. Without evidence, it's not science. Doesn't mean it's bad, it's just not science. Science or the scientific method is not going to discount a conclusion because it just doesn't make sense. When they discovered that the Earth was sitting in a vacuum and it wasn't in this fluid, because sitting in a vacuum with nothing holding it up just didn't make any sense. But the scientists who discovered that, it was all based on evidence, and turns out they were right. But they were mocked and thought of as dumb. But evidence is what we have to go on. Okay. Science is about being a skeptic, and a skeptic is not somebody who doesn't believe something. A skeptic is someone who says, "Well, that's interesting. I'll believe it when you show me, when you've got some evidence, because I may have this belief that, this is actually a circle, but if you can show me some evidence, I'll believe it's a rectangle." Evidence, that's the important part. Read this real quick. It's a good one. Okay, pause it and read it. So, science is curiosity. You are trying to find an answer to something that's interesting to you. It shouldn't matter what the answer is, that's what you're trying to find. Pseudoscience is something that tries to match that to their already held preconceived ideas or belief system. Pseudoscience is kind of where you're trying to prove a point. Um, you think something already, and now you're trying to prove it. It's not necessarily looking for the truth. Conspiracy theories, those things that we hear about, those are a type of pseudoscience. I'd like to say fake news is, but that's more of a political thing right now. It's, there's a lot of fake misinformation out there on the internet, and they try to use scientific sounding things. So it's more what's the word? It's more malicious than anything else, because you know that something's not true and you're trying to do it anyways. That's how I would classify fake news. Conspiracy theory, though, they believe something and they're trying to prove it, and they're not necessarily being malicious. They may actually think the Earth is flat, but they're trying to prove that point, and they want to do it through science. But if you're not trying to find the truth, regardless of what you think, that's just not science. One thing that comes up, and I heard this, and I can't remember where I heard it from, otherwise I would quote it. But a conspiracy is when you have two pieces of information. We have a rectangle and we have a pencil, and I know these things are true, but I'm trying to find a way to explain two different points, and those filling in the gaps, if you will, is frequently made up. It's not evidence based. So, oh yeah, theory. You've heard the phrase that, evolution is just a theory, it hasn't been proven yet. That statement is wrong. It's not that evolution hasn't been proven, It's a theory is an explanation. So we have evidence that we have for evolution. You have various structures of organisms in the soil, and stuff at the bottom is older, stuff at the top is newer, and you can see a progression of change throughout. Evolution just means change. So a theory is explaining how those changes that you observed came about because you can't dispute the observations, they're there. Once we started to learn about things like DNA and how it mutates and gets passed on, well, now we've got some hard stuff on how that works. So if somebody says it's just a theory, it's not proven, that doesn't mean anything. It's like saying that blue tastes good. Well, it might, I don't know. But a theory is just explaining something. So watch out for that one. Okay, this is something I found on the internet that's actually, whoops, that's actually pretty cool. Um, okay, and it explains a lot. So slide number one is data. It's observations. Look, there's a bone. Look, there's a pencil. Just whatever. But, well, actually, no, it would be more like, look, there's a cylinder that's yellow and so on. And then you interpret, which your brain does for a lot of things automatically, and you go, oh, huh, that's a pencil. There's your information. And then you can connect, oops, I have two things at once, sorry. You can take previous knowledge, pencil, oh, look at that tip, that's sharpened nicely. Somebody has the Binford 2000 pencil sharpener. I recognize that. And you can kind of start to fill in gaps with things that you already necessarily, that you already know. Um, and then you can say, you can look at it and you go, oh, pencil, I recognize that it came from the Binford 2000 pencil sharpener. So my insight is that whoever sharpened this pencil probably is a fan of Tim the Tool Man, Tim Taylor. I am speaking old speak here. It's an old TV show where they always had a Binford 2000 on it. And then if you've got enough of the information, you can put it together and say things like that. And I'm making this up totally off the top of my head, and I'm recording it, whatever. The pencil was sharpened, so there must be a Binford 2000 within. It wouldn't make sense for it to be an hour away. It's got to be a few minutes away, and you can kind of piece together some information, but it has to follow known paths of that knowledge. If there's a gap in the knowledge, you acknowledge that. That almost sounds like the same word. You say, hey, this has got to be right, but I'm missing a little piece. When Isaac Newton discovered gravity, he actually discovered that whatever makes an Apple pencil fall is what makes the moon orbit the Earth. He had this major gap that there's nothing, the moon doesn't touch the Earth. So I don't know how it works, but all my data says that it works. He acknowledged that missing gap in there, that knowledge, those little bands. Um, he had that insight and he got the wisdom to put it all together, but he was missing a little tiny something and he knew that. But every time people followed that wisdom, it worked. We could send rockets to Mars and have them landed within a quarter mile. It wasn't until 1905, I think, that Albert Einstein filled in that missing gap. And that missing gap was so insane, relativity, that we are still grappling with it over 100 years later, trying to figure this stuff out. So that's your genius, if you will. A conspiracy theory is going to take that and fill in those gaps of knowledge in a way that makes it fit their world idea. In this case, the world idea is unicorns, which I don't know, not bad. Um, I think it's just a skinny rhinoceros, but anyway. Okay, so vetting sources is really, really important right now. This is, you see a lot of people on the internet say, I did my research. No, research is not just Googling stuff. There is some detailed stuff to research. Actual research would be trying to figure out an answer to why does this burn? I don't know. I'm making this up off the top of my head. Um, Conclusions. It's metal. Well, that's totally wrong. It's wood. Now you go test it and you do it over and over and over again. Go back to that first slide about scientific method. But there's also a method of researching things that are written. Back in the day, yes, I did this. You go to the library, you pull index cards, you write down, you go pull it off the stacks, and you write things down as you find it. And you're looking at scholarly articles and stuff. Now, anything can be out there on the internet. And if it gets passed around a lot, people tend to believe it more. So, it's not just the internet. I was told when I was a kid that if you swallow gum, it'll be in your stomach for 7 years. That gets passed on without the internet. So to vet a source means that you're going to check the validity of that source. Is it legit? So some of the things that you want to look for are the author's expertise. Do they have an advanced degree? Do they have experience in the field? Look up some of their information. Right off the top of my head, there was some lady that made the news recently that was talking about how, what did they say? That you didn't need to wear masks, that if coronavirus wasn't bad, yada, yada, yada. And then when they dug into her expertise and her degrees and field, there are a lot of papers about how alien DNA is being used in medicine, and I don't know, there's some bizarre stuff. So look up the author. That's one of the first things I do. I read something. If they've mentioned the author, I Google them, and you can tell right away. Do you need to read the rest of the article? Sometimes. What about the publication source itself? I'll show you a tool where you can go check out those sources. Um, is it scholarly? Is it someplace that is going to publish whatever that comes out there? Do they check all of that? If it's something like Scientific American, you can bet they are going to check it big time. Some news organizations will just put up stories. Unfortunately, advertising is what keeps them in business. So things have been skewed toward the sensational side. So check out the actual source. Check out the bias. The way that it's written. Are they talking about the evil oil company, using phrases like that, or pro, or there are phrases. While I was trying to put this together, and I didn't put in here, but you can Google this. There was a website I found that had common Democrat and Republican phrases that indicate bias. So when you see these phrases, they should be little red flags of, oh, there's some bias here. There's a slant towards their ideas without acknowledging everything. Doesn't always mean it's bad, but you've really got to be aware if it's biased or not. And if you're trying to take it for fact, bias is not fact. Look at the date of publication. I can show you articles that prove that smoking tobacco is safe for pregnant women. They're old papers. They're also, well, malicious, not just biased. Um, so look at the date of it. That's a pretty important one too. Okay, this I found from Vanderbilt Library. It's pretty much the same thing. So if you want to pause and look at it, I liked that. That was a pretty good one. Here are some online tools that I like to use when I find a source I'm not familiar with. Before I read the article, I read the headline. It's great. I go over to mediabiasfactcheck.com and I type in the article, and it has this little tool where it'll tell you, is it extreme one end or the other? Is it biased one way or the other? And they'll tell you about factual reporting and so on. There have been so many articles that my friends have shared, even other science teachers, that have shared that you look this up and it says not only very low, it'll say conspiracy website pseudoscience. I don't even bother reading the article. It's just pointless at that point. Well, sometimes it's fun to read, but Snopes is a good one. I know that some people say that, they're paid for by the leftist mafia. No, the Cajun mafia, that's it. Now, if you know your 80s movies, the Cajun mafia, you should know. That's really, really subtle. Um, I don't know. They every time I've looked, they seem to be fairly factual. I don't know who funds them. That's another thing to look for is who funds them. Where do they get their money? How do they stay in business? They're a good place to start. Wikipedia used to be a terrible place to get information. It is now looked at, I mean, there's things that are pretty bad in there, but it's looked at by so many people that it's become a lot more factual, a lot more reliable. So it's a good place to start looking. So I like Snopes for that. If you're looking at political information, there's PolitiFact. I'm putting that out because politics are so divisive right now, and they're all trying to use science to, make it look like they're on your side. Factcheck.org, I think, is a fairly good one too. There are lots of them out there, but look for the bias. Try to see how are they wording things. Are they trying to convince you of their side of the story? Are they, you can talk about it. Are they talking positive about something, negative about something? Look for the adjectives.